Hello, today I'm going to be talking about my journey through the Porcupine River. The Porcupine River is a tributary into the Yukon River that goes through from Canada into Alaska. Here is my supply list that I'll be taking with me for the 2-week trip. Here are the first 7 days of meals that I'll be eating on my 2-week trip. There's lots of non-perishables as well as perishables. This is my second week of food for the 14-day trip. This is a lot more non-perishables. For my trip, I researched the 2 weeks worth of weather. It's going to be mostly sunny with almost no precipitation. During the second week, there is the only amount of precipitation here, and it's a very small amount, 0.01 inches. This is where I'll be driving to get my airfare to Old Crow, Fort Yukon. And that'll be my destination, Old Crow, where I'll start my journey. This is footage from my airplane ride up to Old Crow from Fort Yukon. I've sped it up a little bit so you don't have to endure the whole thing. The cost of chartering a plane up to Old Crow was about $350 US, and I spent about another $100 getting gear up to Old Crow from Fort Yukon. And this is Old Crow. It's a very tiny village, not connected to the road system. The only one in the Yukon Territory to not be connected. This is a native artist I met there. He goes by the name Paul Williams Jr. He does beadery and leatherworking.
Hello, Sherlock Nice, Janai, Shuri, Paul Williams Jr. The beaver he Quichi, the Quaket, the Jorakanje, the Jijuka, Trinanico Bakwat Hansa, the Jijuka Bakwat Hansa, Saketi Hansa, Yanjet.
These are some of the things that Paul Williams Jr. would have made. He just showed you a couple of his that he did make. This is the beadery style of things. He makes the slippers or mittens with his leather working skills and then embroiders them with a pattern. This is a bowl made in the Greenwich style of artisanship. And this is a painting from a young artist in Old Crow in their government building. While I was at the government building, I met the Greenwich International Committee's chairperson, Joe Linklater. I remembered my AK history teacher asking us to inquire about the native corporations as we went about our river adventures over the summer. When I asked these questions, he replied, "The Gwich'in International Council is a non-profit organization that is mostly dependent on the Canadian government for funds." Alright, now we're going to hear from a more contemporary native artist. As you can see here, they're doing some traditional dance. The Gwich'in people believe that in the afterlife there is a giant garden in which the plants and animals will speak to them if they are good. The Gwich'in also believe in shamans, but usually they are reserved for very rare and powerful people. They like to worship on their own. After spending the day in Old Crow, I finally set out the next morning on my trip down the Porcupine River. During the morning there are the usual gnats, flies, mosquitoes, and all other sorts of pests. My first day out on the Porcupine River had some great sights. There were lots of caribou, I saw some beaver in the water, I even saw a bear scratching its back on a tree. Unfortunately, the second day wasn't quite so nice. There was a lot of rain early in the morning. I didn't see a whole lot of wildlife that afternoon. I also ended up tipping my boat later that afternoon, and I settled in earlier on the bank early that evening for a fire so I could warm up and get dry. Day 3 passed without a lot of event, but on day 4 there was a nice evening sun for about an hour while we set up camp and made dinner. Early on the morning of day 5, we passed the Rampart House, an old house built at the turn of the 20th century. It was an eerie sight to see such an abandoned structure. This is where the Rampart House is. It's only about 60 miles outside of Old Crow, and I had been taking too much time. I need to start speeding things up. I had made good progress since day 5, but now I was entering the small stretch of Class 2 rapids that was on this river. Here are the highlights of that. After getting through the rapids, the next 4 days passed without much event. There was a couple of nice sunsets, and it was just sunny all day. At around midday on day 10, I met an old man canoeing up the river. I asked him what he was going back up to Old Crow for. He said to hang out with family and hunt some caribou for the winter. On my last day's ride into town, I hit a rock underneath the surface of the water and my kayak broke. After about an hour of sitting there, a native family in a larger boat than mine stumbled upon me. They agreed to give me a ride back to Fort Yukon. I asked them what they were doing out here, and they said that they were transporting caribou furs to trade back at Old Crow. I unloaded my gear, put it all back in my car, and ended up driving home. After a 2-week trip, I was tired and ready to sleep.